Have you ever stopped to think about how you'd even begin to write the rule book for the world's largest, most diverse democracy? Well, today we're going to dive into the architectural story behind one of the most incredible documents ever created, the Indian Constitution.
I mean, just imagine that for a second. The task is to write one single document that can unify one of the most diverse, populous, and complex nations on the entire planet, right at the very moment it's born. This wasn't just some challenge, it was the monumental mission that India's founders were facing.
And their solution? Well, it was anything but small. What they came up with was the lengthiest written constitution in the world at the time. And that was completely intentional. For a new nation dealing with such deep inequalities, the founders believed a really detailed blueprint was the only way to protect people's rights and leave absolutely no room for confusion.
But a structure this grand wasn't just built from scratch overnight. Before the final architects could even pick up their pens, a foundation had already been laid, piece by painstaking piece, over more than 100 years of British colonial laws.
You can actually see the DNA of the final constitution evolving right here. Back in 1773, the Regulating Act started centralizing the administration. Then the 1853 Act began to separate government functions. By 1909, you finally see Indians getting a seat at the table in executive councils. And then the big one, the 1935 Act, which basically provided the structural skeleton that the framers would ultimately build everything on.
So, with that foundation in place, it was time for the master architects to assemble. And this was the Constituent Assembly, a group of some of the most brilliant minds in India who were given the incredible task of designing the nation's future.
And listen, this wasn't some small committee. We're talking about nearly 400 members who came from every single province and princely state. They were a true cross-section of Indian society, and it was on their shoulders to debate and decide the fate of the entire country.
And they really took their time to get it right. For almost 3 years, this assembly met again and again, meticulously debating every single clause. This was not a rushed job. It was a deeply thoughtful, deliberative process.
The whole process was incredibly methodical. It all started with their first meeting back in 1946, where they laid out the main goals. Then, a drafting committee, which was headed by the brilliant legal mind Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, took those goals and turned them into precise legal language. This all led to the final adoption in November of 1949, and then it officially came into force on January 26, 1950.
But what's the soul of this whole thing? I mean, if the articles are the bricks and mortar of the building, then the preamble, that's the philosophical blueprint. It tells us not just what the Constitution does, but why it even exists in the first place.
And those first 3 words, we, the people, are maybe the most important in the entire document. They make it crystal clear that the ultimate authority, the source of all the power, doesn't come from a king or a foreign government, but from the citizens of India themselves.
Then the preamble goes on to define the actual character of the Indian state. It would be sovereign, meaning completely independent; secular, so no official state religion; democratic, governed by the will of the people; and a republic, where the head of state is elected, not some hereditary king or queen.
And it goes even further. Beyond just defining the state, the preamble lays out these massive ideals that the nation would always strive for. It promises not just one kind of justice, but justice in the social, economic, and political spheres. It guarantees liberty of thought and expression, equality of status, and it tries to promote a spirit of common brotherhood, what they called fraternity.
So how did the architects actually design the machinery of government? Well, they were smart. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel. Instead, they looked at the great constitutions all around the world, took the best ideas they could find, and then adapted them to build something that was uniquely Indian.
You can really see that global inspiration right here. From the UK, they took the parliamentary system of government. From the USA, they borrowed the idea of fundamental rights and judicial review. That's the power of courts to strike down laws that are unconstitutional. From Ireland, they got the directive principles, basically guiding goals for the government. And from Canada, they took the model for a federal system with a strong central government.
But, and this is so important, this was no mere copy-paste job. The final product was a completely unique creation. It created a federal system, but with a unitary bias, which gives the central government more power when it's needed to hold a huge, diverse country together. It set up a single citizenship, it gave voting rights to every single adult right from day one, and it built a fiercely independent judiciary.
So you've built this incredible structure. How do you protect it, right? How do you make sure its core identity can't just be demolished by a future government?
Well, the answer came from the Supreme Court itself, in a game-changing ruling that created something called the Basic Structure Doctrine.
Think of it like this. Parliament has the power to renovate the building. It can change parts of the Constitution. But what the Basic Structure Doctrine says is that it cannot tear down the building's load-bearing walls. Core ideas like democracy, federalism, and secularism are part of this unchangeable foundation. They protect the very soul of the Constitution.
And this elegant, complex, and deeply thoughtful design has endured for over 70 years now. It's provided the framework that's allowed the world's largest democracy to get through immense challenges and to flourish.
All of which leaves us with one last big thought. This document was a revolutionary blueprint for the India of 1950. But as India continues to change and evolve, the question for all of us is, what should the blueprint for the next 70